The past year could be best described for many local organizations, the year of the pivot. This week in Erie, we are joined by Ben Speggen, Vice President of the Jefferson Educational Society of Erie, to talk about how their group at the Jefferson, Ben, you guys are so reliant on in-person speeches, and that's part of your platform is bringing the community together to learn. So I would imagine for you, the pivot was pretty hard this year.
Thank you for having me, Jill. First and foremost, really appreciate you doing this. I know this is not traditional, but I appreciate the Zoom interview and a chance to be with you. And Zoom's been a lot of what we've been doing. And, certainly for us, like you said, it's been challenging because over the past decade, we've really built up the Jefferson Educational Society, Erie's community think tank, as a place where we gather people, a gathering space for people to exchange ideas, shoulder to shoulder learning, the emphasis of drawing a crowd, having them interact with the speaker, and then having them interact with each other in the audience to talk about these ideas afterwards. And so certainly that's a challenge when restrictions are put in place for the safety of all, public health crisis. We cannot gather people. But our team is persistent, and we've got perseverance. And early on, we knew changes were going to come. We didn't want to shut the doors and say, we'll turn the lights back on when this is all said and done, because if anything, when does a community need a think tank the most? During crises, we believe. And so we've been able to pivot our programming to a digital platform to create a digital learning space. And we've been able to increase our publications as well. Proudly, I say more than tenfold. We've produced more than 120 publications in the course of 2020. And then 2020 alone for digital programming, we were able to put out 119 programs over Zoom and invite people in throughout the community to tune into this, but also people from well beyond the walls of Erie County.
Well, and that's what we were speaking a bit, and it seems like whereas Zoom, it's not as personal, but boy, it's really opened up, I'm sure, the doors for the Jefferson to be able to bring speakers to speak to the masses, and more, like you said, than ever before.
Right, Jill, and it's been a win-win for us. Number one, it's much more convenient for somebody to hop on a 30-minute to a 60-minute Zoom interview and to be able to talk about ideas that are just as relevant in a digital arena learning space as they would be in person. But also it lowers that barrier of access to folks who might not have been able to get to the Jefferson Educational Society before. We're seeing audience members tune in from Maryland, from California, from Florida, all throughout the country. People can access this wherever they are. And so we're finding new ways to meet that audience. And the digital arena allows us that broad reach to touch audiences everywhere with the programming that we're doing out of Erie, Pennsylvania.
So Ben, talk about some of the things that you've been able to do. I mean, in terms of, I'm sure you had great ideas and plans for 2020. I know a lot of people, looked at their schedule and said, well, maybe not the summer, but hopefully the fall. When did you all finally just say, you know what, it's time to just approach this as it's going to be a year of the digital program rather than in person?
So that's a great question, Jill. Our team hit the ground running very early on. As we all can remember, it was March 16th that we got the directives from the governor, as well as directives from the CDC and local organizations too, of shuttering venues and not gathering people in place out of an abundance of caution to really flatten the curve from the spread of the virus. So we went into it like a lot of folks, assuming this might be 10 days, 14 days, but we launched the digital programming early. We went digital on March 12th with our first program to try it out. We knew it would be a learning curve for us. It's something we hadn't done before. So we wanted to make sure we were starting early. We were plugging people in as quickly as possible. And we actually shifted some of the programs that we had scheduled at that point to the digital arena. So thankful for our presenters, so thankful for our team to make that pivot quickly and then continue to learn. Once we started to see the investment in this, the fact that the community was plugging in, they saw it as a resource, they saw it as a value, we knew this is something we were going to continue. And we're making that pledge, beyond the pandemic. This is not something we want to take away from people. We never want to create access and then somehow create more restriction after the fact. If people are more comfortable engaging with us in a digital learning space, we're going to continue to provide that. And there is real value to that, of people being able to still interact. We have audience Q&A still in these programs. Folks can send in their questions in advance. They can put them in a comment section live while we're doing these programs and get those answered on air as we're engaging a presenter. So as we continue to grow it and continue to add people to the programming, we knew this is something that we don't just want to continue for the short term, but something we really want to invest in the long term.
Well, let's talk to you. Mentioned to the publications division, it's increased tenfold. Why and what exactly is that?
So a great thanks comes to our contributors, our scholars in residence. That was a relatively newer initiative for the Jefferson Educational Society, was to create a scholars in residence program to take local talent and give them a platform to do tremendous research that's important to local issues as well as regional and national issues. And to continue to develop that. That was something that was underway and that we were planning to build out in 2020. Obviously, the pandemic impacted that, and we had to pivot. And one of the ways we pivoted were that our scholars and residents stepped up and said, "How can we help?" And they just started writing. And then they wrote some more, and then we edited some, and then they wrote even more and more and more. In fact, we're coming up on the 52nd, which means a whole year out from book notes from Dr. Andrew Roth, one of our scholars and residents, who has launched a couple of really great series with us that we were able to do in person prior to the pandemic. The American Tapestry Project, that's now actually pivoted to a radio program as well on WQLN Public Media. Episodes also available on the NPR One app. So he's got a national footprint with this as well. And he's continued to develop this, the search of the American narrative. What is the American story? How do we tell that story to ourselves? He has immense source material for that. So he started writing these book reviews and these thoughtful expositions on the source material. It's helped shape his series. And he's coming up on the 52nd one of those later in March. So we'll celebrate that anniversary for that. But other scholars and residents, Dr. Judith Lynch, our Decadian scholar, in fact, former county executive, has been tremendous, focusing on a series on elected Erie County women, the history of that, celebrating that in the Year of the Woman with the centennial achievement of the 19th Amendment. We've also had new folks come into the fold, like Dr. David Frew, who we appointed to a scholar in residence position this year with his tremendous On the Waterfront series, talking about Erie history and the development along Erie's bayfront, childhood memories that he experienced as someone growing up in Erie. And I tell you, Jill, the response has just been fantastic. People email us regularly after these pieces go out. You can sign up for our email subscription list, or you can find them available free to download on our website, jeserie.org. But people are writing back all the time, sharing their stories, thanking us for this. We're continuing to really build that engagement. That's been a hallmark of the Jefferson, is that folks feel engaged and plugged in. That this is not a game of golf where they're following along with what we're doing. This is really tennis. This is back and forth, and we've been able to keep that in a digital arena. And we're really, really proud of that. Something we really work hard at. So we've been able to increase that. We've had other contributors to the publication division that we're grateful for, including former Global Summit presenter Dr. Jackson James with the American Institute for Contemporary German Studies out of Washington, D.C., that weighed in early during the pandemic to talk about what was happening in Europe and what comparisons can be drawn to what we were experiencing in the United States. We've had other people write fantastic things for us in the community, like Dr. Paris Baker, wrote a tremendous report taking a look at another one of the crises facing our country right now, which is systemic racism and the long overdue conversation around racism. We looked at that in the US and in Erie. Some tremendous recommendations came out of that. A Pain-Filled, Polarized America. That essay and report is still available online, jeserie.org, and a whole slew of other things. So we really saw the community step up and say, how can we help? How can we get information to people who want it? Jill, you probably remember in the early days, many of us didn't know how long this was going to last. And many of us might have been sitting at home with not much to do. We thought, what better an opportunity than to connect people to resources and information, give them things to read, give them things to watch, use this as a learning opportunity for folks as they might be experiencing something abnormal and totally new, as many of us were going through the pandemic.
Well, and also, though, something somewhat familiar, but obviously what we would love to see in the coming year, back in person lectures and events. What does the year look like? How are you all planning 2021 and beyond?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Jill. And I wish I had a crystal ball to tell you the exact date we're going to open the doors and we're going to
You
welcome
mean you
people
don't
back. We're
know?
excited. We don't know. So but we're so excited when we can. And,
Right.
and safety obviously is paramount and doing that responsibly. Fortunately, we've got a great health department in Erie County that is putting out great recommendations and guidelines. We're also following along with what's being recommended by the state and what's being recommended by the CDC. So we're taking all of that into consideration for when we can smartly reopen the doors to the Jefferson Educational Society and welcome back in-person learning, but to do it in a way that people are going to feel comfortable, they're going to be safe, and it's going to be an enjoyable experience. So We know that as much as it was a bit of a shock and disruption and sharp pivot out of in-person programming, we were ready to go the following week. We had to cancel programs and make that pivot very quickly. This will be something that we can thoughtfully and smartly and strategically work back into. So we're building up that return to getting people back into the Jefferson Educational Society, back into those programs that we know and love, they know and love, they're hungry for. So we're grateful for folks' patience and waiting and knowing that we're going to make the best decision we can as soon as we can. But our team's working on that right now, Jill, evaluating what a return is going to look like and what the resuming of in-person programming is going to be when we can do that.
And Ben, in the last seconds we have here together, if you could once again let people know where they can go to maybe look at, if they haven't before, or for people who are familiar, where can they go to get this information and see some of these programs?
Sure, thanks, Jill. Folks can head to our website, jeserie.org. There under the events tab, you'll see all the past events. Those are all archived that we've been doing now, more than 140 digital programs you can stream on demand at your leisure. You can also find all of the publications, all archived there, all free to download, all available to read at your leisure. You can also connect with us across social platforms. We're posting these programs on Facebook. We also post them on YouTube. We have a great following on Instagram as well, sharing information there, as well as Twitter. But jeserie.org, you can always find us there. And the phone line's still open, 814-459-8000. You can also call us for updates and information about our programming, both digital and the moves we're making to make that return as soon as we can smartly.
We look forward, Ben, to seeing you in person once again someday, but we do appreciate you joining us on This Week in Erie to share what the Jefferson Educational Society has done over the past year. And I can't believe it's already been a year, but we thank you for your efforts and thank you for talking to us today.
And thank you, Jill. We appreciate it. We're all in this together. We're all working toward the better. We're looking forward to coming back and looking forward to seeing you in person too.
Thank you, Ben.